Good day, good day, good day, and welcome back to Mixed Breed Podcast, Season 1, Episode 5. We want to welcome everyone back. This is your boy, Big Bash, and DJ Michida. Hey, I know that we've been gone for a little bit, but we're going to jump right back into it. We have a very serious yet sensitive topic that we're going to talk about today, and it has been talked about not just locally, not just regionally, not just within the United States, but globally, and that is racial injustice. Now, I'm sure that if you have been alive, been thinking, breathing, walking, talking, working, or unemployed, you've heard about the heinous act that happened to George Floyd on May 25th. And for those who don't know, they may have been under a rock, sleeping and comatose, or just didn't care. We're going to go over a brief description of what happened to this very strong young man and some of the actions that have been taking place ever since this heinous act. And we're going to get into a little bit of discussion. Now, for those who are a little bit sensitive to what's going on, please turn it up and get an earful, because sometimes hearing the truth is better than believing a lie. So, without further ado, we're going to get into exactly what happened.
And please understand that the opinions that we express in our podcast are opinions that are solely not only used to see a comedic side of certain issues, and we do like to, make fun of certain things, but this particular issue we hold near and dear to our heart, and there's no comedic standpoint in this. This is completely from the heart, genuine, and we feel that this is a serious topic that needs to be discussed.
All right, so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and go into a brief description of the actions that happened on May 25th, and then we're going to discuss it a little bit. Okay, so on May 25th in Minneapolis, there were some police officers that arrested George Floyd, who was a 46-year-old black man. He was African American. On the curb of a deli manager calling, saying that he tried to use a counterfeit bill to pay for some goods. Well, what ensued thereafter was that the officers took him out of his vehicle, they handcuffed him, they walked him over to the sidewalk before taking him back to their squad car. At that point, from what the officers say in a report, is that he became belligerent, so they had to subdue him. Now, in that belligerent rage, there was an officer by the name of Derek Chauvin who decided to use a unrestricted police tactic, as he called it, by putting his knee on the neck of George Floyd while he was on the ground in handcuffs for a total of 8 minutes and 46 seconds. In doing so, he cut off the blood and air supply to George Floyd, while George Floyd was begging and pleading, letting the officers and everyone around there know that he could not breathe. Now, there has been some other speculations that, maybe he was fighting, and so there was no way for the officers to restrain him. But people, when you look back at all the videos that are on YouTube and everywhere else around the world, on every social media site, it does show that once the officers took him out of his vehicle, he was put into handcuffs immediately. Okay? Fact. They walked him over to the sidewalk, he was still in handcuffs. When they sat him down on the sidewalk, he was still in handcuffs. Fact. When they picked him up and took him over to the police SUV, and they say he became belligerent, they laid him down on the asphalt, the street next to the police car. Fact. The factoid that Derek Chauvin put his knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, causing George Floyd to expire, is the heinous act that we're going to discuss today. We all know that through history, that the black man, the African American, the man of color, has always been a target for police. This is not an opinion. This is not just something that's summarized. It is a fact. What made it even more so was George Floyd's plea to the officer that he could not breathe. Would he still be here today if Derek Chauvin would have taken his knee off of his neck? Yes. Would he be here today if they did not subdue him in the way that they had? Yes. But they tried to turn this whole issue around by saying in the very end, from the coroner's report, that he A, had underlying health issues, that he B, was on drugs, and C, that he had COVID-19, aka coronavirus. Okay? All of these factors don't weigh in on the fact that a man over 100 pounds had his knee placed on his neck, on his jugular, cutting off the blood to his brain, and knee on his neck, cutting off the air supply. Okay? These are all facts. These are all videotaped facts. These are all eyewitness facts. So the reason why we have such a global outpour of anger is because that we know 99.9 3/4 of the time, whenever a heinous act like this happens, starting from way back in the day of the lynchings to the modern day murders that have been happening with police, is that they always get off on technicalities. Rather, they're put on administrative leave, aka vacation with pay, until the police union can figure a way to justify their actions. This is the topic that we're going to discuss today.
Now, some other interesting facts that are newly developed that I just found out recently myself is that Derek Chauvin, the police officer who has been charged with the most severe crime out of the original 4 police officers, who actually knew George Floyd, actually worked with George Floyd.
Correct.
As a bouncer at a local establishment.
Correct.
And they actually knew each other and worked together.
Correct.
So not only did Derek Chauvin know the suspect, well, not suspect, but know George Floyd, but kind of gives
a different
perspective, right. As in, okay, it wasn't just some random African American male that he pinpointed. It was a known individual that he personally knew. So is it go beyond just being a racial profiling and maybe not also a personal vendetta or a personal grudge or some other hatred that he had for this individual as well, on top of it being a sense of racist situation. Now, another fact also revealed is that Mr. Police Officer Tao, who was in the front, the Oriental looking Asian police officer,
Asian persuasion,
come to find out that his sister is the wife of Derek Chauvin, which then makes those 2 police officers brother-in-laws.
Related.
Now, isn't that crazy? Not only do they work together, but they're also brother-in-laws, which goes to say, okay, well, if Derek Chauvin knew George Floyd, do you think at one point or another he could have introduced him to Officer Tao, and Officer Tao personally knew George Floyd at one particular point or another? Which means now you have 2 individuals who not only are pinpointing an African American male, but it's also an African American male that they both personally know.
Correct.
So now this takes on a whole new perspective on this particular situation, to where it not only increases the tensions between, about racism. But now it seems that it's also to a point where people are knowingly wanting to harm, hurt, and do social injustice to African American people as well, on the simple fact of they have their own personal vendettas.
Correct. Well, now, for those who still don't know, because they've seen the video and they saw Derek Chauvin with his knee on George Floyd's neck, and you're saying to yourself, well, okay, this is just another bad cop. We're going to delve into the actual level of who Mr. Chauvin really is as an officer, okay? So not only is he being charged with second degree, which it should be first degree. Let's not even taint the realm of that, okay? It should be first degree, but they're saying second degree murder, okay? The restraint technique that he used, okay, clearly was not part of the department's training, okay? Nowhere in their training manual, nowhere in their training at the academy is that a restraint technique, okay? Mr. Chauvin also is being represented by Tom Kelly. For those who don't know who Tom Kelly is, he is the same attorney who got Officer Yanez, who murdered Philando Castile, acquitted, okay? So trust me when I tell you that they're going above and beyond all means to try to get Mr. Chauvin off of this charge, okay? But let's go a little bit deeper into Mr. Chauvin, okay? Mr. Chauvin was put on leave in 2011 for an inappropriate police shooting of an Alaskan Native American, Mr. Leroy Martinez, okay? Let's dig a little deeper. Chauvin shot Ira Latrell Tolles, an unarmed black 21-year-old man, in 2008. Okay?
Wow.
Okay, let's go a little bit deeper than that. Mr. Chauvin was one of the officers who murdered Wayne Reyes, a Latino man with 16 bullets forced into him. A total of 42 rounds were shot off.
Wow.
Okay? This is the person who Chauvin is the guy I'm talking about. This is his rack list, okay? Chauvin and another officer were also chasing a car in 2005, causing the death of 3 people, according to the Communities United Against Police Brutality, okay? And let's not forget that there were 12 police brutality complaints against Chauvin already in Minneapolis. Officers of the Police Conduct Complaint Database, okay? They are all listed as closed, non-public, and no discipline. So Mr. Chauvin has
been busy.
He's racked up.
He has been busy.
A very intense list of, as I'll call it, not oppressed. We'll call it what it is. Racist.
He's been busy,
marks,
bro. He's been
okay?
busy pinpointing in social,
and
whoever the hell he wants.
And now that his name has been put into the public eye, okay? Because when they first said that he was arrested, okay, it was further found out later on by one of the commissioners in Minnesota that was not the truth. It was an untruth. What happened is that he was taken and put into protective custody because he and his family were in fear of their life. Now I'm going to say that again.
Wow.
He was not initially charged in the beginning. He was taken and put into protective custody. His band of crooked brothers took him and his family and put them in protective custody for fear of their life. Okay? This man who goes out every day wearing a badge, supposed to protect and serve, and yet, after creating a heinous scene of taking this man's life, he now is running in fear of his own life. Okay? So he himself not only has an axe to grind with literally the entire world, okay? But the day that he leaves here, the day he passes, the day that his body and his soul separates, he's got to stand before those pearly gates after spending much time in purgatory and explain why the actions that he did were justified. Okay? So let's forget the court of law. Okay? Let's forget the court of law for a moment.
Okay.
You and I both know that if I stand up and I go out in the public and I grab anybody, and I am a man of stature, okay? I am over 6 foot.
Yeah, you're a big dude. You're a big dude.
I husky, handsomely husky is what we'll call it.
I'm sorry, what?
Handsomely husky.
Oh, okay. That's what we're calling it?
Yes, yes we are.
Okay.
And I am not the average 150-pound man. I do have a lot of history on me. Okay? So, yes, history. So, for me to put my knee on anyone's neck, okay, would surely cause
asphyxiation,
irreparable damage to that individual.
Yes.
Okay?
I agree.
I would be taken into custody.
Quickly. Expeditiously.
Without haste. I would be charged.
Expeditiously.
Immediately. I would be placed in a jail cell.
Underneath it.
So quickly. For all of the prison to have fun with me. I would literally have to live with my eyes open, whether I'm sleeping, walking, talking, or anything. But yet, because Mr. Chauvin is wearing a badge, he's now given the opportunity to walk free.
And you always, and I don't know if a lot of people, if our listeners have any experience with police officers, but in my personal experience, I have to honestly say, whenever there's usually a group, and when I say group, I'm talking anywhere between 3 or more. Whenever there's a group of officers, whether it be at a public function, where they come to visit a school or standing around, whatever, you see them in the parks whenever like there's a big event, community event going on, whatever. I tend to notice that whenever there's a group of officers, there's always that one officer who seems to just really love the power,
yes,
and love their job,
yes,
so much,
yes,
because of the power, that shield, that uniform,
yes,
the
power trip,
prestige of a police officer is supposed to have, and it goes to their ego, and it strokes their ego, and you can tell because they begin to display a sense of arrogance that it becomes to the point where you can just tell right away there's this one officer who just loves his job so much, because again, they give this sense of arrogance. They have this sense of I'm better than you. I don't know if they might talk to you rudely or quickly or abruptly.
They do.
They might, kind of disregard what it is you're saying to them. But I guarantee you, in the future, and if you've never experienced this, the next time you go around a group of officers, whether it be, like I said, at a community event, or at the park, or at the fair, whatever, and you see a group of officers, and it's usually like I said, it's usually like 3 or more, there's always going to be one out of that group who just stands a certain way, like, I wish something would pop off. I'm the tough guy of the group.
Right.
I'm the one who gets off on this, and you can tell because they have this power trip and this arrogance about them. And if you watch the video, and if you have already, I'm not telling you to go back and watch it again because it's a very difficult video to watch.
It's gripping.
However, if you have not seen the video and you're unable to, I understand. But if you are ever able to not look at the parts of George Floyd, but after the issue with George Floyd, and you look when the police officers get up after the EMT takes George Floyd's body, you look at the video of Derek Chauvin and his arrogance, you can see it. in his mannerisms. You can see it in his body language. You can see it like he just felt like, oh, this is gonna be nothing. I was doing my job, and he got hurt in the line of duty. I'm gonna be fine. Like, he had this arrogance that he was just gonna be untouchable. And we gotten to the point where this has happened so much in our society, to the point where we're not standing for it anymore.
No.
Trayvon Martin was I'm gonna be honest with you, I think Trayvon Martin was the starting point, or the first match that was lit. And from that on, it's like, especially when George Zimmerman got off, it got to the point where we said, okay, you know what? This is not right. And then next thing you know, another incident happened, and that lit another match. Then another incident happened, and that lit another match. And this particular instance, I think this George Floyd incident is what broke the camel's back. I think that's when people was just like, wow, they blatantly don't understand us. Country needs to wake up and realize that there's individuals out there, police officers, who don't have any respect for anybody for just being a human being, and that they are based on racism and color of your skin.
Yes.
And guess what? This is the particular incident where it broke the camel back, because it shows a complete disregard for human life.
Yes, it does. And what a lot of people were mad. Okay?
Angry. Frustrated.
There's so much emotion out there right now.
Fed up.
And people don't know how to express it. So yes, there have been a lot of protests, and I'm all for that. There have been some looting, okay?
And now, let me touch base on the looting. Now, I've been kind of mixed about the looting, because on one hand, I felt like, the looters are people who are just, using violence and destruction to get free stuff. Yeah. But then I thought about, believe it or not, Martin Luther King stated that looting, believe it or not, is a avenue of releasing repressed anger and being fed up, to the point where it's an avenue from the social injustices and being in poverty and not having, to the point where people got fed up, and looting became an outcry of releasing that anger and releasing that repressed those repressed emotions. So looting is not just a cause. It's more or less an effect of the different causes, from, like I said, social injustice, racism, things like that. And this is just an effect of it. And that's what looting is. So, it really depends on how you look at it. Me personally, I've changed my views about the looting, because I've noticed that I can understand it. I'm pissed off, I'm upset, and you're so mad, you just want to destroy something.
You do.
You just want to destroy something.
You do, but at the same time, let's look at the reason why it's happening. Okay, there have been some protests that were very, very peaceful. Now,
I'm sorry. One more thing I wanted to say about the looting. They found out that a lot of people who were starting the looting and the vandalism turned out to be white supremacists.
Yes, they were, and that's what I wanted to talk about. The looting that initially started. Okay. When it first started, it was not based upon the fact of, okay, Mr. George Floyd died, we get to go and have a fun time breaking into people's businesses. This all started, and if you all remember back, you can do your homework. Those who are great SEOs, those who know how to navigate around Google, if you remember during the time that they were protesting for Trayvon Martin, there were strategically placed undercover officers that were put into those protests to agitate and create a sense of panic and violence.
Wow.
Just so the officers could intercede and start making arrests. Now, case in point, if you look back, and you'll see that in Sanford, there was one officer who was identified because he was one of the ones that was throwing rocks, and one of the protesters told him, stop throwing rocks. At that point, he continued to throw rocks. So when they grabbed him and they pulled his mask off, one of the attendees that were there at the protest immediately identified him as an officer. At that point, he ran into the crowd of officers and disappeared. Why didn't they apprehend him when they knew he was throwing rocks? Why didn't they take him down and arrest him if they saw that he was throwing rocks? Because he was a strategically placed undercover officer there to create a sense of violence and chaos. The same thing is happening in Minnesota. All of a sudden, there are crates and barrels and cages of rocks being placed all over the city where there are protests. And there were several people who were living in apartments who were videotaping the officers that were dropping these off. So again, why would you put something like that in an area where there's peaceful protests going on? Because they know that they're going to have their strategically placed undercover officers there to again start throwing rocks, start
anarchy,
creating all this chaos, so the officers can start shooting their tear gas, shooting their rubber bullets, spraying with their hoses. Again, this is
targeting African American people.
This is the 1960s all over again.
And they're going to be targeting American people or Caucasian Americans who are defending African American people.
Correct.
And now, I don't know if people have noticed this, but there was actually one particular incident where there was an officer who was separated from his fellow officers, and a group of peaceful protesters formed a human shield barrier between him and the looters, protecting and shielding him.
Correct.
Mind you, the police officer was white.
Correct.
And the protesters were all African American.
Correct.
And they protected this police officer until he could get back to his fellow officers from the other looters. So again, even in a time of turmoil, African Americans are still trying to find peaceful ways of getting our message across without resorting to violence, without resorting to chaos and vandalism. However, I do get it. I understand it. You get upset, you want to punch something, you want to break something. My only problem that I have with the looting is vandalizing black-owned businesses. If you care about your community, if you care about your people, why would you destroy something that they have spent so much time and money to build? We're supposed to be uplifting each other, not breaking each other down, and that includes their businesses.
Well, it's not even just the fact that it's just the black-owned businesses. It's all the businesses in general, because there are hundreds of videos out there now where they're attacking UPS trucks, FedEx trucks.
Target.
They're going into the supermarkets, the stores, the retail stores. Yeah. They're going into all of these businesses and they're looting. The bad part about it is that the media shows, of course, only the African Americans going in there. Not one time had they shown any other person of color or uncolor
different color,
in there doing any looting. And of course, everyone knows why. Now, we're not going to make any speculations to what the media is doing, but when you see it, you know it, you understand it. My whole take on the looting is, don't loot, give them the boot. Okay? Now, the best way you can get back at them is when you are there to protest, a peaceful protest, a meaningful protest, okay, that creates more waves, more positive waves, more positive energy to get more people involved, okay, to make a change. But once you start looting and throwing rocks or creating the chaos, this gives the officers the means and rights to go out there and hurt more people. Case in point, there was an elderly man, 75 years old.
Yeah, I saw
was
that.
not African American
At all.
walked up to the officers to ask them a question. He was immediately told to move back.
Shoved.
He could not even turn around quick enough before one of the officers with his nightstick pushed him. He falls back, hits his head, and begins bleeding profusely from his ears. Okay, a pool of blood is now pouring out of this man's ears, and when one officer goes to bend down to try to give any type of assistance,
mind you, the officer that bent down to assist him was the one that initially pushed him.
he was lifted back up by another officer and told to keep moving. Okay, now Governor Cuomo said that that officer should be suspended. In light of that, 57 other officers resigned because they knew in their heart that what was done there was completely wrong. Okay? Now, if you can get 57 officers to resign off that one action because they knew it was wrong, why is it that you cannot convict this one man for doing what he knew was wrong?
Second degree murder.
Second degree murder.
Not first degree. Second degree.
Being defended by the same attorney that got off the officer that killed Mr. Yanks. Now, am I still mad? I'm mad. Have I been a statistic like that before? I have. Because when you live where I live at, down here in sunny South Florida, okay, and an officer shows up, here is how it generally works. An officer is there to take control of a situation, any situation whatsoever. So what does he do? Does he look for the most elderly person? No. Does he go to the child? No. He targets the tallest, the biggest, and the strongest individual there to create a dominance and to show that he is in control of the situation.
A display of power.
I have been to one of many events where something happened, and before I knew what happened, I was the one that he was talking to. So even though I wasn't the initial person that they came there for, they wanted to make sure that they established dominance over the entire event to make sure that everybody knew that they better not mess with them.
And that they were in power.
And that they were in power. Now, again, are all cops bad? Absolutely not. No, they're not. And as I stated before in one of our past podcasts, gone are the days when kids used to run up to a police officer because they had baseball cards, football cards, or anything to give to the kids.
Back to the
okay?
Yeah.
The police and the community are completely torn right now. Okay? And what it's going to take to mend and sew that back together is not going to happen anytime soon. Trust and believe. Okay? I've heard a lot of other people speak and talk about, well, this is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. I can't speculate that it will or won't, but factoid, there have been more people out there who are claiming that this is simply a tinderbox with a match ready to be struck. Okay? And that tinderbox is sitting on top of dynamite. Okay? I've heard everything from targeting officers. I've heard everything from the official purge of officers. I've heard everything on attacking officers. Okay? And I think that what's going to happen is we're going to get to a point where there will be a point of no return. We're here to help, to mend, and try to make better for our community. Because whether you believe it or not, this situation will not stop immediately right now. I guarantee you, I am a man of color living in America, and the one thing I can tell you is that despite any and everything that you see today, the chance of it happening again in the near future will. Okay? We've even had one of the local news stations that went out and they did a report and they spoke to all of the police officers, and now the police want to start a group called Policing the Police, okay, where they want to start eradicating bad officers. So by them actually announcing that they want to eradicate bad officers, completely instills my factoid in the beginning. They knew that there was a badge of bad officers. Why could they not get rid of them before? Why does it take now to get rid of these officers? You understand? They want to review the use of force policies, okay? These are things that should have happened years ago, okay? It should not take this long for the police to act accordingly, okay? They want to educate these officers on systematic racism and bias, okay? They want to train and track behaviors of officers. I can't tell you how many times there have been organizations that have wanted to start departments and groups within the police force, policing the police already on situations that have happened, and it never goes anywhere, okay? They're trying to build trust and transparency and accountability within the community. Well, the first act of building trust and getting the accountability within the community is to first convict this man, okay? Because it seems like it's going to take a very, very, very long time before they come up with convicting Mr. Chauvin, and that should not be the case.
Now, I know that you said that you don't feel that all cops are bad.
Correct.
You did state that.
That's correct.
And I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't feel that way either, because
there are some really good cops out there.
Now, not only that, I actually happen to know, I've seen a young lady grow up, and that's the field that she went into. I've known her since she was a little girl, and then she grew up, and now she's a police officer. However, some people do feel that all cops are bad, and let me explain why. They say that all cops are bad because they willfully participate in the police system that enforces state-sanctioned violence. Okay? Someone can be nice, but that doesn't make a cop good. See, the police were invented in the 19th century as a response to crowds, including riots and slave insurrection, not to crime. The especially bad cops abuse their power to bully, assault, attack, and murder people of color, often with impunity. Even if someone was an innocent of the crimes they're accused of, such as lethal force, condoned by the police and protected by his brotherhood, it shouldn't be allowed. So that shows you that, yes, cops, some people believe that all cops are bad because they willfully participate in a police system that enforces state-sanctioned violence. And that's something to think about. Now, remember when I also mentioned about the Martin Luther King standpoint?
Yes.
See, a lot of people, again, don't feel that looting is the answer, but again, I said I understand. Well, it says here, most protests should stay nonviolent, but the point of protest is disruption. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, a riot is the language of the unheard. These are anguished symptoms of the diseases of white supremacy and police brutality. Right. They will go away, but state-sanctioned violence won't. Very quickly, the media and even well-meaning Caucasian Americans focus on property violence instead of the murders of black and brown people. Okay? So, working class people pilfering convenience stores is deemed looting. By contrast, rich folk and corporations stealing billions of dollars during their class war is considered good and necessary public policy, which is aided and abetted by arsonic politicians in Washington lighting the crime scene on fire, trying to cover everything up. So if you think about it, you have physical rioting and looting in a neighborhood in public mainstream, but then behind the scenes with these white collar crimes, you have arsonic politicians who are covering up their crimes from corporations and rich folks stealing billions of dollars. Yeah. So what's the difference?
The difference is, hands down, it's called ear notes. It's called the fact that they're getting away with murder because they are represented by individuals that turn and twist the laws. Did you know that the gun laws in the United States are not as strong as they were back in the day? I guarantee you that if every single solitary person that can willingly and legally get a gun, get their gun license, and purchase a gun, and I do mean every African American, the gun laws in the United States would literally change overnight.
Guaranteed.
As
Expeditiously.
Before the sun came back up, there would be a new law. But
new restrictions,
new limitations,
new requirements,
tons of requirements,
qualifications,
more qualifications. Okay? But because they know that that's not going to happen, like myself.
Because a lot of African Americans can't, because they have, especially black men, because we have such a big history of being racially profiled while black and things like that. And what happens, it increases your criminal record, which prevents you from getting...
Here's the thing. I am probably one of the few that has paid, and I am a lifetime NRA member. I
thought NRA was strictly for Caucasians.
No. It's that right?
Predominantly Caucasian.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
It is. You know why? Because sometimes we don't want to do what we have to do in order to achieve what we need to achieve. Wow. Some people will say, "Oh man, I can't afford that. Oh, I can't do that," so they don't.
And you're official
lifetime
NRA. But I thought the NRA was also white supremacists.
They've got to pry my gun out of my cold, dead hands.
Wow. Well, here you hear it, folks. You hear it. I have never met, but I am doing that now, the very first black African American NRA member. You heard it here first, folks. Only on Mixed Breed Podcast.
Mixed Breed?
And we want to thank y'all again. This is normal 30-minute, podcast, but as you can see, this is an issue that is near and dear to our hearts.
This was an extended banter that needed to happen. We hope that we're able to edify a lot more people out there. We hope that we're able to sustain and possibly calm down some people's views on what's going on. Please do not involve yourselves in going out there and rioting, but pick up a sign, go out there, protest, show that you are a lot smarter than they think you are by making your positive energy show throughout the community, throughout the world, by stating your business and your facts and your love for yourself, your family, your friends, the community, and the world, because we need more educated, more sensible, more on-point individuals making these facts, as I like to say, factoids. Okay? Spread that positive energy and let people know. Okay? We love you. We don't want to see anybody out there getting hurt. Okay? And right now, this is a very critical time. Okay? This is, as I said before, a tinderbox with a match on it, and it's sitting on top of dynamite. Do not be that individual that's standing near that barrel of dynamite when it goes off. Please be that individual that rises above it to show these people that you are here for yourself, your loved ones, and the world. Please, please, please.
All right. Once again, want to thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of Mixed Breed. We will go ahead and try to go back to our daily routine of every Friday, having a new fresh podcast for y'all. Want to thank y'all again for tuning in. We love y'all. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Be blessed.